All right, welcome back everybody. So this week we're going to be taking a look at some advanced CSS topics. Actually, this week and next week we're going to be taking a look at some more advanced CSS topics, as well as some media embedding in our website. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to actually take our recipe CSS and HTML that I believe we were using back in week 5. So you'll want to go find this markup, and the HTML should look like what you see over here on the right. So what we're going to do is over the next few weeks we're going to transform this kind of ho-hum looking web page into something a lot nicer, something better to display this recipe at. So we're going to want to start with what we left off of in week 5 as a base for this, and then we're going to add a little bit of HTML, add a little bit of CSS, and go on from there. So let's take a look at what we're going to turn this into. So I've done a little Photoshop mock-up of what I'd like this to look like when it's all said and done. So a few things you'll notice. So first of all, we have a different background image. We've got a new header and a new logo, and I'll provide all the imagery for this. So you guys, if you don't have Photoshop or if you don't have access to anything like this, don't worry about it. I'm going to provide you with all of the images. But if you'd like to make some of your own images, I'll show you how to kind of slice this up and use it within the CSS as we move forward. So anyway, we're going to use an interesting image replacement technique to take care of this logo up here. And then you can see we've got a nice big image along with some transparency and some nice text work here. This still looks the same down here, but next week, not this week, we're actually going to use some web fonts to make this whole thing look a little bit better down here. So this is what we're aiming for this week. And what we need to do to get there isn't actually a whole lot. We don't have to change what we're doing too much. We just have to integrate that imagery and change our layout a little bit to help this HTML file and this CSS file look like this at the end. So first things first, we need to make sure we have all of our content in line. So we need to make sure we at least have a heading up here for this. We're going to need to make sure we have all of our internal markup for this stuff. So maybe a second level heading, possibly a third level heading, and then make sure all of our lists are set up here properly. The other thing we might need to do is create an inside container to hold all of this that's separate from the H1. But let's look at our markup and see what we have. So first things first is we do have our main H1 element up here. So this is the element we're going to replace with the image or that main logo that's centered up at the very top. So that's what we're going to want to have up there. So next we have a section called ID recipes, which goes all the way down here. And this could actually act as our internal container. So if we go back to Photoshop, you can see, so up here would be the H1, then this would be the recipe container, and then below that, within it would contain this background image, this text, and all of our main recipe information. So that might work out well. We won't have to add anything there. And then within that, we just have a simple article which sections off each of the individual recipes. So in the future, I might want to add additional articles with additional recipes to this. For right now, we're just going to focus on a single recipe page. So we're going to leave the markup as is, but keep in mind you could use this to kind of repeat down the page. So as it stands right now, our HTML is okay. So we don't have to change anything here. So that's the great thing about CSS, and if we do our markup properly the first time, is that we can make drastic changes to our layout and the way our website looks without having to change much of the underlying HTML structure. So let's take a look at our CSS page and see what we have to work with here. So again, not much going on and not much we're going to have to change. So before we get into the next video, let's make some quick changes to prepare this for accepting some imagery and some slice ups from Photoshop. So let's jump back into our Photoshop mockup, and you'll notice that there's no upper level border, and we're going to need some spacing in between the main area and what will be a heading up here. So if we jump back to our code, what we can do is we can take this border off of our body. So that will get rid of that. And then on the H1, let's get rid of this background. And this isn't going to matter a whole lot yet, but it will when we move on. We're not going to want any straight backgrounds that are going to cover up what we're trying to do. So the other thing we can do is take the background off this container and then make it a little bit wider. And we're going to go to 800 pixels because I've already determined that that's the length here. In fact, if you turn your guide on and if we just draw a little marquee here, you could see that that was at 800 pixels wide. So that is those are the dimensions we're going to be working with. And actually, if we just quickly put this background back on, you can see that we're at a little bit wider stance right now. But let's take that off for now. All right, so now what we should have is our HTML and CSS ready to accept some of our additional imagery and our additional CSS to make our recipe site look a lot better. So in the next video, we'll start moving some of these elements from the Photoshop comp into our HTML page, and I'll show you guys how that all comes together.